Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of Teaching Tales. I am your host, Brent Coley. I am a former 4th and 5th grade teacher, currently a principal at the elementary school in beautiful Southern California. And this is the podcast where we share stories. It's all about storytelling. Each week we have a different educator on to share his or her experiences in the classroom or the front office or the district office, and how that has helped shape them as an educator. And I am honored to have this week join me, Jeff Bradbury. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, we have never met in person because you are in New Jersey, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Well, so we're doing this via Google Hangout, but we have spoken more than once. And first of all, for those who may not know you, give us a little background, give listeners a little background about who is Jeff Bradbury.
Sure. I am the instructional technology coach at Westwood Regional School District, where I'm responsible for all of our teachers, K-12, and also working with their students. We have about 2,700 students or so, and it's my job to make sure that all the teachers are up and up on the latest and greatest in the world of ed tech. And when I'm not doing that, I am the father of the world famous Edu triplets, who are now all together after some medical complications. We'll start there, and we're enjoying everything that's going on. So yeah, we're having a good time here.
Fantastic. The Edu triplets, I believe, that's their.
You can find them on Twitter at Edu triplets.
Edu triplets, fantastic. Well, Jeffrey, you are somebody, and you are the creator, the founder, creator, and the runner of TeacherCast.net.
Yes.
Tell listeners a little bit about that. I know we'll probably get there at the end again, but this is kind of how I came in contact with you was via your website, TeacherCast. So tell listeners about that.
Sure. TeacherCast is coming up on our 6-year anniversary on July 11th. And essentially, I just refer to it as it's my handbook, right? It's a professional development resource. We have blogs, we have online courses, we have podcasts, we have screencasts, we've got stuff on STEM education, we've got stuff on Apple, Google, Microsoft, you name it. It really has been an amazing place. I say it's a place for teachers to help other teachers. And, I love being... I kind of coined the phrase, I'm the conduit between the classroom and innovation. So I love getting teachers together and putting them with the ed tech people who make the products, and then just watching the magic happen. I absolutely love it, and it's been a fun and exciting last 6 years.
Well, and for anybody who is listening and has not gone there, you got to go there. TeacherCast.net. There is a plethora, to quote the three amigos,
good word,
plethora of information there. So good stuff. And podcasting is one of the things that I think we're going to talk about today. So you are a big podcaster. I used to podcast with my students when I was in the classroom as well. So to start, I'd love for you to share kind of your story with podcasting, because for anyone listening, you and I think are very kindred spirits in that, that's your job. You're an ed tech coach, and you have seen, and I have seen the benefit that podcasting can have. That's one of the reasons that I'm doing Teaching Tales now, is I'm hoping that it can have a benefit through storytelling, through podcasting. But how did you discover podcasting? How did you get started? And then after that, what kind of benefits have you seen? So kind of a 3-part question. How did you discover it? How did you get started? And what positive benefits have you seen from it?
Sure. I'll give you the long story short kind of answer. I remember being an orchestra teacher, and my school, and I was a Windows guy. I was always a Windows guy, built my Windows PCs. I'm a Windows guy. Never much into Macs, never much into Apples, couldn't understand the whole concept of a one-button mouse. And long story short, one day my school decided to put a Mac lab in to the room that I was teaching in, 30 Macs. And I'm sitting here going, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I started looking for YouTube videos. And again, this 6-7 years ago at this point, and trying to come up with how do I teach myself how to use these Macs so I can teach. And then I found a podcast, and the podcast was called Your Mac Show. It was essentially some guy out of his house, and he was going through every single button on his Mac, and he was doing screencasts on how to do all the different apps, and he was doing a show each week on how this particular app works or tool works again. So, keep in mind, the iPhone is now going to be 10 years old. This was 7 years ago. So this was still very, very new with everything here. And so one day, my wife and I were driving from Philadelphia to Long Island, and I put on a podcast. And it was this guy's Your Mac Show. And essentially at that point in time, he was doing this little survey quiz thing of, he asked a question and he wanted somebody to chime in. And so I'm listening to the podcast going, okay, I know the answer to this. So we get up to Long Island and I say, I'll just send this guy an email, right? Why not? And I sent him an email. It was the right answer. And next thing I know, he's sending me a $50 gift card to iTunes.
Oh, nice.
A friendship was born.
That's a good way to get you hooked in podcasting. Yeah.
Right. And so long story kind of goes forward. We became friends. We started talking. And, to me, the guy was like Superman because you do these things. You speak to people. You're teaching, right?
Yeah.
And, we got to know each other a little bit. Then suddenly we decided to do a show called Apple Aid. And it was the two of us doing the same similar thing of let's take apart something on our Macs, because at that point I had become a Mac boy, and let's teach people. And, one day I kind of said to him, I love what you're doing here of let's find something and teach it, find something and teach it. And you got the visuals, you got the audio. I'd love to do something like that. And that was basically the day that he fired me and said, okay, it's your turn.
You're on your own.
And that was literally Mama Bird pushing me off the nest and saying, go fly. And literally, if you look at the beginnings of TeacherCast, it was Your Mac Show, but for education. So I'm not looking at a button and telling you, the principal, how to use it. I'm looking at an app and saying, well, how can you teach with it? And that was July 11th, 2011. You wake up one morning with this visual of what is this going to look like. Now, long story short, Your Mac Show originally had the official Apple logo in its title, or in its iTunes art. And he also did a show called Google Plus Today when that first came out. And he actually was the #1 tech podcaster with Google Plus Today because it was all brand new.
Yeah.
And because you were using the trademarked Apple logo, Apple actually kicked off his feed.
Oh.
You don't get that back. You don't get your subscribers back. You can reapply, but you have to start from scratch. So that's the lesson for everybody. Now, the bottom line is I'm one of those people that if you don't realize that I'm teaching you something. And so when you look at the TeacherCast logo, it is an apple with the TC. And the reason it's an apple is two things. Number one, we're teachers. We have apples, right?
Yep.
The other thing is it's me going like to Apple because how dare you take my friend off for using your Apple logo? I'm going to now do a show with an Apple logo on it.
Yeah.
So that's my little smarky marky kind of way of going on the whole system. So, I like to have fun with it, but literally that was how TeacherCast started. It was somebody saying, you have an idea? Go run with it. And I would think, being a principal, if a student ever came to you and said, I'd like to try something, or if your teachers ever said, hey, I'd like to try a club, you're going to say, go do it, man. Yeah. And I couldn't ask for anything else. So that's really the beginning of this whole thing.
Well, and as you're telling that story, it just the reach. When you started, you said 2011 was when you started with. Yep. So now we're six years later.
Yep.
You went from a smaller show with your friend, and then I love the word picture of pushing you out of the nest, like time to fly on your own type thing. What kind of benefits have you seen with students or teachers? Because your TeacherCast is catering a lot to educators, like to teachers, to administrators, things like that. But you're probably going to have a lot of students on there as well.
Yeah, we my first show was essentially, hey, going out on Twitter and just saying, look, I have an idea. Does anybody want to try this with me? And that's You get three random strangers, put them in a room. And then the second one was a little bit different. And then I said, all right, well, I've got two under me. This is easy. So my third episode was called Administrator Cast. And that was, okay, let's get three principals and start talking to them. And then you realize that, these are just people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we all go to school. We're all going to work. This is just people. And then you get lucky with things. I have done student cast. I think I might have done 2 episodes that I called student cast over the last couple of years. But, I've had the 15-year-old app developer on where he's looking for things and he has 2 or 3 apps out. I've had people like Nick Goyle who, he has a fantastic story of, he was one of those 30 under 30 kind of guys. And he's been, he's an author and he's got, so you start to run into all of this stuff. I've done a lot with Student Voice and had Zach Malabat on, and it really provides the opportunity to create, which I love, and then reach, which is fantastic. And I've been very, very fortunate and very, very blessed over the last couple years to have amazing guests on, both from education. In the classroom, on the classroom, around the classroom, and it's kind of the who's who of ed tech has been on the show. And I'm not saying that to, I hope it's not coming off the wrong way, but
no,
it's
not
been
at all.
It's been a fantastic 600 or 700 episodes or so.
Well, and I think I have met. I've been blessed. I've been able to talk with you a couple times on a couple of your episodes, and through that, I have met. Just recently was on with Casey Bell and Matt Miller, and just today I saw a tweet from Casey that I don't think I was following her before your show. Now that I was on the show, now I'm following her. She just tweeted a great resource about Google, and it's like,
yep.
I wouldn't have seen that. You said the word reach earlier, how you and your wife were driving and you put on a podcast.
Yep.
I think because I used to podcast, my journey into podcasting started with Tony Vincent. Mm-hmm. He former 5th grade teacher, and I've talked about him on other shows, but he's my my virtual mentor. I like to call him. I've never met him. Hopefully one day I will. But he used to podcast with his students. He published a lot of the resources that he used to use online and said, hey, try this with your kids. And I did. And one of the greatest things, kind of, again, going back to that word reach, is Rushton Hurley has one of the greatest quotes that I've ever heard. He said, if students are going to share their work with the world, they want it to be good. If they're just going to share it with the teacher, they want it to be good enough. And it kind of goes back to that whole, if you're doing a writing, how long does it have to be? How many sentences? How many students? It's just kind of natural for them. What is the minimum? How long does it have to be? What are the requirements for this? When I would podcast, I used to have, we called it ColeyCast. It was a student podcast. Every month or so, 3-4 weeks or so, we would put students into groups. If we were doing a science unit on the body systems, for example, I would put one group and they would take the digestive system. We'd already learned about it, so it was kind of a culminating project. They would take the digestive system, and another group would take the respiratory system, and another group the circulatory system, and so on. And they would write scripts summarizing what they had learned, and then we would record it. The greatest thing on that first day of school, when we were kind of talking about everything, is I would pull up iTunes and show them ColeyCast in the iTunes store. And going back to the whole, if they know that their work is going to be seen by the world, they wanted it to be good. And I would show them, hey guys, this is where your work is going to be. It's going to be next to fill in the blank of whoever the musical artist, the hip artist at the time was right there. And I remember when kids would come back and record, very often they would be like, no, can I re-record that? I don't like the way that sounds. I want it to sound better. Right. Which was awesome. And I had one student, for example, who, because what do they say? I mean, the studies show that what is the greatest fear of people? It's not death. What did you say?
Giving a eulogy.
It's public speaking. Yeah, exactly. The greatest fear is, and how often do we as teachers ask kids to get up in front of class. And I understand that there are listening and speaking standards and things like that. But I remember that I had one student who was terrified to talk in front of his peers. Yet when I would pull him back to the side table and have him put the little the headset on and record his part, kid turned into Tom Brokaw. I mean, it was tremendous.
Well, it's a mind over matter thing. One of the things that I get caught saying more often than not is I've never once interviewed anybody on my podcast. I've probably said this to you a couple of times. I always say I've done over 600 shows and I've never once interviewed everybody. They've always been conversations.
We're just talking. Yep.
We're just talking, right? Like,
yep.
I'm sitting here watching TV and we're having a conversation. And if you can do that, then your guest isn't, oh my goodness, he's going to interview me. Or when they ask, well, what questions are you going to ask?
They're going to ask me a question I'm not going to know the answer to.
I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we can say pause, but you if you're walking down the street, you don't have a chance to say pause. So I'm not going to interview you. I've never interviewed anybody. I've been interviewed, but even this we're just two guys with a mic.
It's more fun to have a conversation, to
Absolutely.
tell stories, and I think the beauty of the conversation you and I are having and the medium. I mean, it's one of the things, I think the last time I was on your show and everyone was talking was because I started podcasting, it was back in like 2007 or 2008, I think. And when I left the classroom to move into administration, it was one of the biggest things that I missed. I so missed podcasting with my kids. And video has become like the new, I mean, everything's where's YouTube, it's a YouTube generation and everything's video. But I think that you said everybody drives to work.
Yeah.
And you even said the first podcast you listened to, you were
driving.
You were driving in your car with your wife. And I have had people say that's when they're listening to this show is driving. So radio is never going away. And I don't think podcasts need to go away. And I think you can't, for example, you can't watch a YouTube. Well, you shouldn't watch a YouTube video while you're driving, but you could listen to a podcast while you're driving.
You can stream it, right? I'm one of those guys with the unlimited data plan. So I will listen to most of my YouTube concerts because I'm a big, concert guy.
Yeah.
I'll listen to it in my car. People always ask me, what's the optimal length of a podcast? And YouTube will tell you 11 minutes. And do you know why 11 minutes?
I don't.
You can get 2 commercial breaks in there.
Oh, gotcha.
My answer is 40 minutes because
it's an average commute for many people.
No, it's an average 2 commutes for people. So you can get them on the way up and you can get them on the way back.
That's true.
Because how many times do you sit there and you're leaving work and you look at the podcast you're listening to and you're like, 5 minutes? All right, that means in the middle of my drive, I got to change the channel, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I don't have a length to my shows, but I've stopped saying 60 minutes, take it or leave it, 45. And I usually, my answer is usually, whenever the conversation is over.
Yeah.
Right? Because if when the conversation dies down. Right now, we've been talking for 18 minutes now, and I hope people are still listening to this because it's an engaging conversation. But there's nothing that says you and I have to do 90 minutes right now.
No,
if we're finished, we're finished, and if not, not. And that's part of podcasting is you say, look, I always start with if we're done in 20, great, and if we're done in 40, fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll go however long it's interesting, and don't get offended if I wrap it up and. Don't think, oh, I'm not interesting. He's shutting the lights off. You realize the average person still only listens to your show for about 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if somebody, because my whole purpose in this conversation I wanted to hear your story, but in addition for anyone listening, if you're a teacher listening who's thinking, maybe I should start something like this. Maybe I should do what Brent was saying with his students. What recommendations would you what tools would you recommend that they use?
You had to go there.
I'm sorry.
You had to go there, right?
I don't want you to take a lot of time, but just
you had to go there.
One.
No, see, I don't want to go there with that one
Okay.
because as soon as you say tools, that's the question that you get asked, right? I want to start a podcast. What mic do I need? I want to start a podcast. What, right? But here you are. You're the same person. And you're listening to this, right? You're the same person that says, we're not here to teach Google Docs. We're here to teach communication and collaboration.
Yep.
Because tomorrow it could be Microsoft, and the next day it could be Office Docs, and the next week it could be... So when people start to, I want a podcast, what mic do I need? Or what tool do I need? Dude... No, you want a podcast because you have a story to tell, or you have a passion to tell somebody else's story. Right. And that's where I think it happens. You know what? You and I have said this before. You said, I'll always say to my guests, just call me and tell me what the topic is and when you're free, and we'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's a switch, right?
Yeah.
And some weeks I'll put out 6 shows, and some weeks I'll put out 1 show. And if you start off I want to be a podcaster, what tool do I need? Well, where's your curriculum?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No, absolutely. So the answer to that question, which you're absolutely right, is you don't start with the tool. It doesn't do I need a Mac or do I need a Windows? It's
right.
What are you going to communicate? Is it body systems that your students are going to share with the world of what they've learned? Or
and I'm going to answer the question by saying, well, what do you want to learn? Right? If you look at a lot of the shows that I'm doing lately, and I mean in the last 2 or 3 years, they've been, well, I mean, as I've said, to answer your first question, when you said, what is TeacherCast? And I said, it's my handbook. It's 100% self-serving. Yes, everybody can use it. Please use it. Keep my numbers up, right? But really, I just put out 2 podcasts. One of them I brought on Dan Rizak from Tinker. And we talked about Tinker and their Blue Ribbon Educator program. Great episode. Last Tuesday, I had our co-host Sam Patterson on, and he did a whole show about Scratch. Well, why did I do those? Well, because I had a middle school teacher come up to me and say, hey, I'm teaching this computer science course. I want to learn more about coding. What do you got? And because of podcasting, I said, give me a week. And now I created 2 pieces of content that, yes, the world can have. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. No. This morning I woke up and I sent an email to that teacher and said, here.
The purpose wasn't a random, hey, let's just pull something out of the sky. It was, I want to accomplish this task.
Right. I don't have time for randomness because I've got 3 kids that I'd rather spend time with. Right?
As you should.
Exactly. Or as I'm told. And so all those things are in there. As a tech coach, my job is to provide resources, support, etc. So I could say to that teacher, why don't you come on the program and I'll bring Tinker on and then you guys can talk. And I've done that before to thousands of teachers. I'm a little iffy with my teachers because, sometimes there's just a thing about your people in your own district sometimes not wanting to do that. Don't know why, just the case. But here are 2 episodes answering the questions you wanted me to answer. Do with them whatever you want. And I know the guy's going to listen to them and go, great, because I know he was listening to the show live on Tuesday night. So, yeah, it is self-serving, as everybody's blog should be. Right? Eventually, ultimately, you're making a handbook for your PD or for your students or for your teachers. Or I'm just very humbled and fortunate that other people kind of dig what I'm putting out there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So moral of the story is it doesn't matter what you use.
Nope.
Get out there, share your story, share your resources, share your ideas, whether it's through a video podcast, whether it's through an audio podcast, whether it's through your blog, whether it's through 140 character tweets. Just share, because I always like to say somebody in the world right now
needs
is
that.
They're online searching for what you have. I mean, no matter how small you think it is, somebody is looking for what you have right now.
And 3 years from now, you're going to get a comment on a YouTube video that says, "Hey, does this still work?" Right? Because the other advice I'll always say to my guests, never say things like today, tomorrow, or yesterday. Everything you have to do is evergreen, meaning 3 years. Look, we all know ed tech changes. We know features come and go, all that stuff. But you'd be surprised at how many times, I did a show 3 or 4 years ago at this point with Alice Keeler when she first came out with her 50 reasons to use Google Classroom. That thing still has 120,000 hits on YouTube and counting constantly. Yeah. So, okay, but now I'll answer your question. I tell people to open up a OneNote or Evernote and just use the audio recorder feature. Right? Perfect. Like that, there you go, right? Or but you don't have to go for tools if you or your phone. When I record Evernote on your phone is fantastic.
When I record face-to-face with somebody, literally I sit across the table, I put my phone on the corner, hit record, talk, hit stop. That's upload to Google Drive, done.
Now, and to really answer your question, my external camera of choice is a Logitech C920. They're cheap now because they're discontinued. There is a C930 that's a little bit more expensive, and they just came out with a $199 one, which is like a 4K resolution. It's fantastic, but you don't need that kind of power. As far as classroom equipment, because I always do it between classroom and professional. Classroom, I always recommend the Yeti mics if you're high school, or the Snowball mics if you're younger. And the only difference is the Snowball mics bounce.
They're a little more durable.
They're a little bit more durable, and they can plug directly into an iPad. Don't forget that. Snowball mics plug directly into an iPad. The Yeti mics can go into an iPad. You just need a powered USB hub. That's your quick answer. But really, I'm a second grade teacher. I need to make a podcast. What do I buy?
Nothing.
Don't.
That's what I was hoping when I asked the original question. Yeah, you don't need to. I have not bought anything for anyone listening for this podcast. I have bought nothing. Right. In terms of, I literally use my phone and what we're doing right now, a free Google Hangout to get to record this.
My advice is record in video and then export to audio, just because it's easier to edit. I'm waving my hands in front of the camera, and that could be the edit point here, as opposed to looking at a 30-foot wave of audio that you have no idea. And that's just, again, everything that I do and everything I recommend is completely self-serving, so I can spend more time with my kids.
Gotcha, and that is awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you. Totally appreciate the time. Hopefully my mom and dad got something out of this, because I know that they're listening, if nobody else.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Cooley.
So
and Mrs. Cooley, I would imagine, right?
And that's right. And my wife, my two kids too. So I'll go spend time with them when we're done recording here. And so again, TeacherCast.net. Where else can we find you? On Twitter?
Oh, you can always find me on Twitter at TeacherCast, or leave me a voicemail at TeacherCast.net/voicemail. Email me at feedback@TeacherCast.net. And of course, you can subscribe to all of our audio and video stuff over at TeacherCast.net/audio and TeacherCast.net/video. And before I let you go, I do want to tell your students the same thing that I tell my students, which is keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Totally appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for the feedback that you have sent in. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe in iTunes or Google Play. Leave us a comment and a review. We would appreciate that. And once again, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.